Welcome to the View from ADB 2017. This is a series of video interviews that will be carried out with policymakers attending the Asian Development Bank annual meeting, which this year will be in Yokohama, Japan at the beginning of May. And today I'm joined by Jacopo Dettoni, Deputy Editor of FDI magazine. Jacopo, you and I will both be in Yokohama reporting from there and filming these videos for the View from ADB. And I think one of the key themes, which is bound to be a recurring one in Asia, is infrastructure investment needs. And particularly this year, the ADB, for instance, revised upward the need for infrastructure investment in Asia. So what do you think about that, and what will people talk about at the meeting?
Sure. So basically, Stefania, the ADB meetings are around the corner. Investment in infrastructure will be one of the key feature for the meeting, and it obviously remains one of the key priorities in the region. This is no secret, and to be fair, many the developing Asian countries are already investing heavily in infrastructure. For example, China has gone through a dramatic upgrade of its infrastructure over the last decade. I give you just a couple of figures right from the report you mentioned. The developing Asian countries invested 5.5% of their combined GDP in infrastructure in 2015, which is already a pretty high level for infrastructure investment compared to global standards. But they would need an extra 2.4% an extra spending of 2.4% of their GDP in infrastructure investment to meet the needs of their fast-growing economies. Governments have got room to increase fiscal revenues to bridge this gap, but they would also need to engage more and better with the private sector. And here is where probably the ADB and other multilaterals come into the picture. To act more as catalyzers for private capital for infrastructure investment. For example, by participating in financing of projects developed under PPP, public-private partnership schemes, and thus in a way adding legitimacy to the overall concession scheme. So it's no surprise there will be a specific seminar at Yokohama about how to mobilize private resources for infrastructure development right on the very first day of the meeting. But obviously infrastructure is just one of the challenges that the region as a whole is facing. Another one is certainly the middle income trap that a number of handful of countries in Southeast Asia are already facing. You will be moderating a major seminar on this in Yokohama, right?
Yes, exactly. So I will be moderating the ADB and IMF annual seminar. This year the topic is transcending the middle income trap, and this is very topical for Asia because there are a few countries that are struggling in terms of moving from a low cost to a high value model for their economies. And while they try to go through this phase, economic growth tends to slow. And this means that there is a risk of these countries getting stuck in this middle income bracket. The high income benchmark that the World Bank sets is at about $12,200 in terms of gross national income per capita. And three of the countries that will be definitely featured during the panel, I believe, will be China, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Malaysia is one of the countries in this group that is closest to the high income bracket, but I have to say China and Indonesia, especially Indonesia, are still struggling to remove themselves from this potential trap. So it'll be quite interesting to see what the panelists will have to say about this. And also, I guess, Jacopo, we will be in Japan, and I think it's worth discussing this economy specifically. You are underscoring that actually there are quite a few aspects of the economy that other countries in Asia should look to in terms of lessons to be implemented in other parts of developing Asia. What would these be?
Yes, definitely Japan is a very interesting location for an annual meeting of the Asian Development Bank, which focuses mostly on developing Asia. but Japan can definitely, there are a number of lessons that can be learned from Japan for developing Asian countries. Japan is an archipelago with a high population, and Japanese have always had historically had to make the most of their own resources, which is probably one of the reasons why today Japanese cities are to some extent at the forefront of best practice for sustainable urban development. Yokohama, where the meetings will be held, for example, launched in 2003 a program to reduce the raw volumes of waste sent to landfills. And one of the key pillars of this program was to improve waste management at the household level. I think that today each household in Yokohama has got 10 different categories for household domestic waste separation. This may sound flabbergasting to some extent, but it works just fine. And in the first years of implementation of this program, volume of waste sent to landfills went down by around 50%, which is incredible for a city of about 3 million people like Yokohama. And obviously waste management is a huge environmental but also social challenge for many Asian developing countries. Just a few days ago, a garbage dump collapsed in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and causing fatalities and any sort of other problems. So this is definitely something Japan can definitely be a source of inspiration when it comes to waste management for many Asian countries. But also there are other lessons, maybe not that positive lessons that can be learned from Japan. For example, the way they have struggled over the year to address their aging population. So what do you think Asian countries can draw from the Japanese experience here?
Yes, I guess Japan is definitely one of the challenges that the country still faces, is how to deal with the rapidly aging population that is also translating into a shrinkage of the labor force and also a very, very big pressure on the government to deal with the elderly in the country. So this is still a question that still has to be resolved in Japan, arguably, and one of the solutions that some academics and experts are trying to push in terms of policy reform is to try and get, for instance, more women to enter the labor force to counteract the labor shrinkage. But to be fair, these policy reforms and policy implementation still has to materialize. So we'll have to see, and I'm sure we will be discussing this at the ADB meeting. There's a panel dedicated to how to address the aging population issue. This is something that Japan and other countries in Asia and even in the West have to resolve. So thank you very much for joining us. If you want to see more of the View from ADB series, go to thebanker.com/ADB. Jacopo, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefania. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Thank you.